All right, Dignity Story Z crew, settle in because today's love story is going to leave you breathless. This one's got it all. Asterisk, the marble floor of the Sullivan mansion felt like ice beneath Claire Donovan's bare feet as she pressed her back against the library door, her heart hammering against her ribs. The necklace was gone. Her fingers traced the hollow at her throat where the silver chain had rested for 17 years. The sun and moon pendants that were her only connection to a past stolen by fever and time. I'm looking for this. The voice cut through the darkness of her world like a blade. Claire's head snapped toward the sound, her hazel eyes wide and unseeing. Footsteps approached, measured and predatory. Who's there? Claire's voice trembled as she gripped her white cane tighter. Vanessa Harper, the name dripped with false sweetness. I work for your husband. I found this on the floor. Claire heard the soft clink of metal, her necklace dangling just out of reach. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by unease. Something in Vanessa's tone made her skin crawl. Thank you, Claire whispered, extending her hand. It means everything to me. I'm sure it does. Vanessa's fingers brushed Claire's palm as she placed the necklace there, but her touch lingered too long, too cold. Such an unusual piece. A sun and moon together. It's almost like it's waiting for its match. Claire's breath caught. How could this stranger know about the significance of the pendants when Claire herself barely understood it? She fastened the chain around her neck with shaking fingers, the familiar weight settling against her chest like armor. I should go, Claire murmured, tapping her cane against the marble as she moved toward where she remembered the door to be. Of course, but Claire. Vanessa's voice followed her like smoke. Be careful who you trust in this house. Not everyone wants what's best for you. The library door clicked shut behind Claire as she escaped into the hallway, but Vanessa's words echoed in her mind. The Sullivan mansion had never felt like home, but now it felt like a trap. The walls seemed to press closer as she made her way through corridors, lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors who had never welcomed her into their legacy. Jack Sullivan stood at his office window, 30 floors above Manhattan, watching the city blur into evening shadows. At 30, he commanded an empire built on steel and stone, but inside he felt as hollow as the skyscrapers he owned. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, dark hair disheveled, blue eyes haunted by guilt that never left him. In his desk drawer lay a pendant identical to the one he'd given away 20 years ago, a sun to match someone's moon. Sunny. The name carved itself deeper into his chest every time he thought it. Mr. Sullivan. Greg Foster's voice interrupted from the doorway. His assistant's thin frame cast a long shadow across the office carpet. The quarterly reports are ready for your review. Jack didn't turn around. Any word from the investigator? Nothing new, sir. The trail went cold in Oregon, same as always. 20 years of searching. 20 years of private detectives and false leads and photographs of women who weren't her. Jack's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where guilt sat like a stone. He'd failed to protect her once. He'd failed to find her ever since. The reports? Leave them. Jack's voice was granite. I'm going home, home. The word tasted like ash. The mansion on Long Island wasn't home. It was Dorothy's domain, his grandmother's chessboard, where she moved pieces according to prophecies and family traditions that strangled him like chains. And now there was Claire, the stranger Dorothy had forced him to marry, whose presence reminded him daily of his grandmother's control over his life. The drive through Queens felt like traveling through purgatory. Streetlights blurred past the Mercedes windows as Jack's mind wandered to the wedding 3 weeks ago. Claire had stood at the altar in a borrowed dress that hung loose on her small frame, her blind eyes wide with fear as she repeated vows she clearly didn't understand. He'd spoken his own words like a death sentence, sealing both their fates with a kiss that felt like betrayal. The mansion's gates opened automatically as he approached, iron jaws welcoming him back to his gilded prison. Inside, the house hummed with the quiet efficiency of servants who knew better than to acknowledge the family's dysfunction. Jack found Claire in the conservatory, a glass room filled with plants she couldn't see, but somehow tended with gentle hands. She was humming softly, a melody he didn't recognize as she watered a row of orchids. The late sun streaming through the windows turned her auburn hair to copper fire. And for a moment, something stirred in Jack's chest, something he quickly crushed. "You don't have to do that," he said from the doorway. Claire startled, nearly dropping the watering can. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were home. It's fine." The words came out harder than he intended. "The gardeners can handle it, I know." Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "I just like feeling useful." The sadness in her tone hit him like a physical blow. Jack stepped into the conservatory, the air thick with humidity and the scent of jasmine. Claire had turned back to her plants, her movements careful and practiced despite her blindness. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked, surprising himself. Margaret had a small garden. Claire's hands stilled on the orchid's leaves. "Before the drinking got worse, she taught me to feel what plants needed." Jack knew about Margaret Hayes from the investigator's report. A bitter woman who'd raised Claire more out of obligation than love, who'd sold her to Dorothy for $5,000 like livestock at auction. Claire. Her name felt foreign on his tongue. "About our arrangement, I want you to know it wasn't my choice." She flinched as if he'd slapped her. "I understand. Do you?" Jack moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Because I'm not sure I do." Claire turned toward him, her unseeing eyes, somehow finding his face. "Your grandmother believes I'll save your family. I don't know how a blind girl from nowhere could do that, but I'm grateful for a roof over my head. Grateful." Jack's laugh was bitter. "You were sold, Claire. Like property." "Don't be grateful for that." "Then what should I be?" The question burst out of her with surprising force. "Angry? Heartbroken? I've been both, and neither changed anything. At least gratitude doesn't hurt as much." The honesty in her voice stopped Jack cold. He'd expected tears or accusations, not this quiet acceptance that somehow made everything worse. She was close enough now that he could smell her shampoo. Something simple and clean that reminded him of summer mornings he'd tried to forget. "I'm looking for someone," he said suddenly, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Someone I lost a long time ago." Claire tilted her head, listening with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "What happened to her?" "I don't know." The admission carved itself out of his chest. "One day she was there, the next she was gone. I've been searching ever since." 20 years is a long time to carry that kind of pain. Jack's breath caught. He hadn't mentioned how long it had been. "The way you said her name," Claire explained softly. "Sonny, it sounds like something you've been whispering to yourself." For decades, he hadn't realized he'd said the name out loud. Jack stepped back, walls slamming back into place. "I should let you finish here, Jack. Wait." Claire's hand shot out, her fingers brushing his wrist before he could pull away. The contact sent electricity through both of them. "I may be blind, but I can hear loneliness. It sounds just like mine." For a heartbeat, Jack let himself imagine what it would be like to stay. To sit among the orchids and tell this strange, damaged woman about the girl who'd owned his heart since childhood. To admit that he kept her pendant in his desk like a relic, that he whispered her name to empty rooms, that guilt and love had tangled into a knot so tight it was strangling him. Instead, he pulled away. "I'm sorry, Claire, for all of it." He left her standing among the flowers. And neither of them saw Vanessa watching from the hallway shadows. Claire's necklace heavy in her pocket where she'd placed it after making a perfect replica. The real one would serve her purposes much better than Claire would ever know. As Jack's footsteps faded, Claire sank into a chair among the orchids, her fingers moving to the necklace at her throat. The metal felt different somehow, colder, but grief made everything feel wrong. She didn't know that her one connection to the past was already gone, stolen by a woman who understood that desperate people would pay any price for hope. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Long Island, and the first drops of rain began to fall. 3 days after the storm, Manhattan gleamed like polished obsidian under the October sun. Jack sat across from Vanessa in the conference room of Sullivan Enterprises. Quarterly reports spread between them like battle plans, but his attention kept drifting to the woman who'd somehow become indispensable to his business operations in just 6 months. Vanessa Harper was stunning in the way of sharp things that cut without warning. Auburn hair caught the light as she leaned forward to point out profit margins, her green eyes intense with focus. She wore ambition like expensive perfume. Jack found himself drawn to her certainty in a world where everything else felt fractured. The Portland development is 3 weeks ahead of schedule, she was saying, her manicured finger tracing numbers across the page. If we move fast, we can break ground on the Seattle project before winter. Impressive work. Jack's voice held genuine appreciation. I don't know what I'd do without you. Vanessa's smile was perfect, practiced. You'll never have to find out. A knock interrupted them. Greg Foster entered with coffee and an expression of barely concealed irritation that had become his default around Vanessa. Your 3 o'clock is here, Mr. Sullivan, Greg announced, setting down the tray with deliberate precision. The investigator has an update on the Oregon lead. Jack's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Send him in. Detective Ray Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s who'd been chasing ghosts for Jack Sullivan for over a decade. He entered with a manila folder tucked under his arm and the look of someone delivering bad news. What did you find? Jack's voice was carefully controlled. Morrison opened the folder, spreading photographs across the conference table. Black and white images of a small town, a rundown house, official documents. Willow Creek, Oregon. I followed the paper trail from the children's home like you asked. Jack's hands clenched as he studied the photos. Vanessa moved closer, pretending to organize papers while her eyes devoured every detail. There was a fire at the children's home 20 years ago, Morrison continued. Most records were destroyed. But I found a survivor, Margaret Hayes, who took in one of the kids, and Morrison pulled out a photograph that made Jack's world stop. A young girl, maybe 5 years old, with bright eyes and a smile that punched through his chest like a bullet. She was wearing a necklace. Sun and moon pendants caught the cameras, flashed like tiny stars. Her name was Claire, Morrison said softly. Claire Donovan. Hayes raised her until 3 weeks ago when she was. Morrison paused, consulting his notes. Sold to a wealthy New York family for $5,000. The conference room felt like it was tilting. Jack gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white against dark wood. Claire, his wife. The stranger sleeping down the hall from him was Sonny. Sir? Greg's voice seemed to come from underwater. Are you all right? Jack couldn't speak. 20 years of searching, and she'd been brought to him like a gift he was too blind to recognize. The fever that stole her memories had stolen his Sonny, and left Claire in her place, but they were the same person. The same gentle soul he'd loved as a boy. Sold into marriage with him by a woman who'd never deserved her. Vanessa watched. Jack's face crumble with satisfaction blooming in her chest. She'd studied that photograph for hours after Greg brought her Morrison's preliminary report. Now she moved with surgical precision. Jack. Her voice was soft, concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. I have. The words scraped out of him like broken glass. Morrison gathered his papers, sensing the shift in the room's energy. There's more, but maybe we should continue this later. No. Jack's voice was raw. Tell me everything. The fever that took her memory also affected her sight. She's been blind since childhood. Morrison's weathered face softened. From what I could gather, Margaret Hayes wasn't kind to her. Drinking problem, money troubles. The girl Claire, she spent most of her life taking care of a woman who saw her as a burden. Each word was another nail in Jack's coffin of guilt. While he'd been building an empire, Sonny had been trapped in poverty and darkness, caring for someone who'd eventually sell her like cattle. He'd failed to protect her as a child, and he'd failed to recognize her as an adult. There's one more thing. Morrison hesitated. The necklace in the photo. Hayes claimed the girl was clutching it when she arrived at the home. Said she wouldn't let anyone take it off her? Jack's hand moved unconsciously to his jacket pocket, where he always carried the sun pendant. The match to her moon. Evidence that their childhood promises had meant something, even when memory couldn't hold them. After Morrison left, the conference room fell into heavy silence. Greg excused himself with obvious discomfort, leaving Jack alone with Vanessa and the weight of revelation. She's your Sonny, isn't she? Vanessa's voice was silk over steel. Jack nodded, unable to trust his voice. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air like poison. What could he do? Tell Claire that he was the boy who'd loved her, who'd given her that necklace, who'd promised to marry her under the stars? Tell her that fate had twisted them back together through Dorothy's manipulation and Margaret's greed? She doesn't remember, he said finally. Maybe that's for the best. Vanessa moved closer, her perfume mixing with the scent of coffee and paper. The past is gone, Jack. You can't build a future on the ashes of what was. Her hand touched his shoulder, warm and real and present. Everything Claire wasn't, everything Sunny couldn't be anymore. You deserve to be happy, Vanessa whispered, not trapped by guilt over someone who can't even remember loving you. Jack looked at her, then really looked. Vanessa was everything he should want. Brilliant, beautiful, ambitious. A woman who chose to be here, who saw him clearly and stayed anyway. Not sold into marriage by desperation, not bound by prophecies and family obligation. Jack. Vanessa's voice was barely breath against his ear. Let me help you forget. Her lips found his before he could think, before conscience could intervene. The kiss tasted like ambition and expensive lipstick, like everything he'd built. His adult life to become. When they broke apart, Jack felt hollowed out and guilty and desperately grateful for something that felt like choice. This is complicated, he said. The best things always are. Vanessa's smile was triumphant, though she hid it well. I should go, but Jack, don't torture yourself over the past. Claire seems happy enough in her garden. After she left, Jack sat alone in the conference room, as Manhattan sprawled below him like a conquered kingdom. Photographs Morrison had left seemed to watch him with accusing eyes. Sunny at 5, bright and trusting. Claire at 22, broken by life and circumstance. Into someone who'd learned to be grateful for cruelty, he pulled out his phone and scrolled to Claire's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button as his mind raced. How do you tell someone that you're the missing piece of their shattered past? How do you admit that you've been cruel to the person you'd spent your life searching for? Instead, he called his driver. The mansion felt different when he arrived that evening. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets. Every corner held the weight of recognition. Jack found Claire in the music room, her fingers moving over the piano keys with surprising skill. I didn't know you played, he said from the doorway. Claire's hands stilled. Margaret had an old piano. I taught myself by ear. Jack entered the room, drawn by the melody she'd been playing, something hauntingly familiar that made his chest ache. What was that song? I don't know. Claire turned on the bench to face him, her expression puzzled. It's been in my head for weeks. I can't remember where I heard it. Jack's breath caught. It was the song he'd hummed to her during thunderstorms. When they were children, the melody he'd made up to chase away her fears. Some part of her remembered, even if her mind couldn't hold the context. Claire. Her name felt sacred on his lips now. I need to tell you something. She tilted her head, listening with that intense focus that always made him feel exposed. Is it? Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth sat in his throat like a stone, too big to swallow, too dangerous to speak. If he told her now, what then? She was legally his wife, bound by Dorothy's manipulation and Margaret's greed. She'd never chosen him freely. And knowing their past wouldn't change the present circumstances. And then there was Vanessa. The kiss still burned on his lips like a brand of betrayal. I wanted to apologize, he said finally. For being cold? For making you feel unwelcome. Claire's smile was sad and beautiful. You don't need to apologize for protecting yourself, Jack. I understand what it's like to build walls. Do you? The question escaped before he could stop it. I've been building them since I was 5. Her fingers found the piano keys again, picking out a fragment of melody. Sometimes I think I had another life before the fever. Dreams that feel too real to be just imagination. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs.
What kind of dreams?
A boy with dark hair who made me laugh. Summer afternoons, under an apple tree. Someone who gave me a necklace and promised we'd be together forever. Claire's voice grew distant. But dreams lie, don't they? Especially to people like me. People like you. Broken people. People who get sold by the only family they have left. Claire's hands fell into her lap. I learned a long time ago not to trust dreams. Jack wanted to tell her that sometimes dreams were memories trying to surface. That the boy in her visions had dark hair because he was sitting 3 feet away from her, drowning in guilt and recognition. That the necklace around her throat was a promise he'd kept even when he'd forgotten who it was meant for. Instead, he stood up. I should let you practice. Jack. Claire's voice stopped him at the door. Thank you for listening. Margaret never liked it when I talked about the dreams. Weren't dreams, Sonny. The words slipped out before Jack could catch them. Claire's head snapped up, her unseeing eyes wide with shock. What did you say? Jack's mouth went dry.
Nothing.
I should go. He fled the music room like a coward, leaving Claire sitting at the piano with her world tilting off its axis. She'd heard him clearly. Sonny. The name that lived in her bones like an old song, that felt more real than Claire ever had, in his study. Jack poured 3 fingers of whiskey and tried to convince himself he'd imagined the recognition that it had. Flickered across Claire's face. But the truth was a living thing now, crawling under his skin like fire. She was starting to remember. And Vanessa Harper, watching from the surveillance room she'd had Greg install months ago, smiled as she rewound the audio of Jack's confession. Some weapons took patience to forge, but they were always worth the wait. The phone call came at 3 a.m, dragging Jack from dreams thick with guilt and childhood memories. Vanessa's voice cut through the darkness of his bedroom like a blade. Jack, you need to come to the office. Now, what happened? Come and Jack. Her voice carried a tremor he'd never heard before. Don't tell anyone where you're going. The drive through empty Manhattan streets felt like traveling through a graveyard. Streetlights cast skeletal shadows across empty intersections. As Jack's mind raced through possibilities, a break-in, a fire, corporate espionage. Nothing prepared him for what waited in Vanessa's office. She stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her usually perfect hair disheveled, her power suit wrinkled. On her desk lay Claire's necklace, the sun and moon pendants catching. The city lights like accusations. How did you get that? Jack's voice was barely human. Vanessa turned, and Jack saw that she'd been crying. Real tears, not the manufactured emotion she wielded like a weapon in boardrooms. I took it. The words fell between them like stones. 3 days ago from the library, I was going to, she stopped, her composure cracking. God, Jack, I was going. To pretend to be her, you're Sonny. Jack's world lurched sideways. What? I heard you talking to Greg about the necklace, about the girl you'd been searching for. Vanessa's voice broke on a sob. I thought if I could convince you I was her, if I could make you love me the way you loved her, you stole from my wife. The words came out like broken glass. You stole from Claire. I know. Vanessa pressed her hands to her face. I know, and I'm sorry, but Jack, you need to understand something. She's not who you think she is. Jack moved toward the necklace, his hands shaking as he picked up the familiar weight of silver and promises. Explain. I had the necklace authenticated. Vanessa pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer. The jeweler found something engraved inside the moon pendant. Something microscopic that could only be seen under magnification. A photograph. Etched in letters so small they were nearly invisible were 2 words. For Sonny. Jack's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair as 20 years of certainty crumbled around him. This proves she's Sonny. No, Jack, it proves someone wanted her to believe she was. Vanessa moved to her computer, pulling up files that made Jack's blood turn to ice water. Bank records. A paper trail that led back 20 years to a children's home in Oregon and a woman named Margaret Hayes, who'd been paid far more than $5,000 over the years. Margaret Hayes received monthly payments, Vanessa said, her voice steady now, professional. $50,000 a year for 20 years, all from an account traced back to Sullivan Enterprises. Jack's mind reeled. That's impossible. At your grandmother has been paying Margaret to raise Claire as Sonny. Vanessa's words fell like hammer blows. The necklace, the dreams Claire talks about, even her blindness. Dorothy orchestrated all of it. That's insane. Said Vanessa pulled up another file. Medical records that made Jack's stomach turn. Claire wasn't born blind, Jack. Margaret had her sight destroyed when she was 6 years old. Chemical burns made to look like an infection. The conference room spun around Jack as pieces of a horrific puzzle clicked into place. Dorothy's certainty about the prophecy, her insistence that Claire was destined to save the family, the convenient way Claire had appeared just when Jack needed a wife. Why? The words scraped out of his throat like gravel. Control. Vanessa's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. Your grandmother knew you'd never marry for business. But you'd marry for love, wouldn't you? For the girl you've been searching for all your life. Jack thought about Claire in the conservatory. Tending plants she couldn't see, Claire at the piano, playing melodies that felt familiar because Dorothy had probably had them played for her repeatedly. Claire accepting cruelty with gratitude because she'd been trained to accept whatever scraps of affection were thrown her way. She's not Sonny, he said, the words hollow. No. Sonny died in the fire at the children's home 20 years ago. Dorothy found Claire in the same home and decided she'd make an acceptable substitute. Vanessa moved closer, her hand gentle on his shoulder. I'm sorry, Jack. I know how much she meant to you. Jack stared at the necklace in his hands, the symbol of a promise made to a ghost. Everything he'd believed, everything he'd built his adult life around, was a lie crafted by a woman who saw people as chess pieces. What about Claire? He asked finally. What about her? She thinks she's Sonny? Those dreams, those fragments of memory implanted, carefully constructed over years of psychological manipulation. Vanessa's voice hardened. Dorothy found a broken, traumatized child and molded her into what you needed. Claire Donovan is a victim, Jack, but she's not your victim to save. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not just what Dorothy had done to him, what she'd done to Claire. A child who'd lost everything in a fire, then had her sight stolen, her mind manipulated, her entire identity constructed as a gift for a man who didn't even know she existed. I have to tell her, Jack said. Tell her what? Vanessa's voice sharpened. That the grandmother who forced you to marry her tortured her into becoming someone else? Every memory she treasures is a lie? That the man she's married to has been mourning a dead woman while she lived in the shadows? Each question was a knife between his ribs. Jack thought about Claire's fragile smile, the way she accepted cruelty as if she deserved it. How would she survive learning that her entire identity was a fabrication? She deserves the truth. The truth will destroy her. Vanessa knelt beside his chair, her green eyes intense. Jack, look at me. Claire Donovan is a stranger who was tortured into resembling someone you loved. Your real responsibility is to yourself, to your own happiness. Jack looked at the woman kneeling beside him, beautiful, ambitious, real in ways Claire never could be. Vanessa had chosen him freely, loved him without manipulation or lies. She was offering him an escape from Dorothy's web, a chance at something genuine. I can make the payments stop, Vanessa said softly. Margaret Hayes can disappear. Claire can have the divorce and settlement she deserves, and you can be free. Free to love someone who chose you. The offer hung in the air like oxygen. Jack found himself leaning toward it, toward her, toward a future that didn't taste like guilt and obligation. Then he thought about Claire's laugh when she'd discovered the orchids were blooming. The way she listened to music with her whole body. The strength it must have taken to survive Margaret's cruelty. Dorothy's manipulation, and his own coldness with grace. Real or manufactured, those qualities belonged to her. The woman who tended gardens she couldn't see and played melodies that made his chest ache. The woman who'd looked at him with understanding when he'd been cruel, who'd offered comfort when he'd given her none in return. I can't, he said finally. Vanessa's face hardened. Jack, I can't abandon her, not again. She's not Sonny. No. Jack stood, clutching the necklace like a lifeline. She's Claire, and Claire deserves better than what she's gotten from any of us. Vanessa rose as well, her expression shifting from pleading to calculating. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. Jack moved toward the door, then stopped. Vanessa, what you did tonight, telling me the truth. Thank you, her smile was sharp as winter. Don't thank me yet. The drive back to Long Island felt like traveling through purgatory. Dawn was breaking over the East River, painting the sky the color of old blood. Jack's mind churned through everything. He'd learned everything he'd lost, everything he still had to lose. He found Claire in the conservatory, her hands moving gently over the leaves of a jasmine plant. She wore a simple white nightgown, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. And she looked so fragile that Jack's chest ached. "You're up early," she said without turning around. "I couldn't sleep." Jack entered the glass room, breathing in the humid air, thick with the scent of growing things. "Claire, we need to talk." She stiffened at his tone. "That sounds ominous." "It is." Jack moved closer, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders. "I know who you are." Claire's hands stilled on the jasmine leaves. "I'm your wife." "No, you're Claire Donovan. You're 22 years old. You lost your parents in a fire when you were 5 and were raised by Margaret Hayes, who sold you to my grandmother 3 weeks ago." "I know all of that." Claire's voice was carefully controlled. "Do you know that Margaret was paid to raise you? That she was given specific instructions on how to shape your memories, your dreams, your entire identity?" Claire turned slowly, her unseeing eyes finding his face with uncanny accuracy. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my grandmother found you in that children's home and decided you'd make an acceptable substitute for someone I'd lost." Jack's voice broke on the words. "She had you tortured, Claire. She had your sight destroyed and your mind manipulated. So you'd become what she thought I needed." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Claire's face cycled through confusion, understanding, and finally a terrible, hollow recognition. "The dreams," she whispered, "aren't dreams. They're implanted. Memories designed to make you believe you were someone you're not." Claire sank onto a bench among the orchids, her face white as bone. "Who am I supposed to be?" "Someone named Sunny. Someone I loved when we were children." Jack knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Someone who died 20 years ago." The sound Claire made wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a laugh. It was the sound of a person's world ending in real time. "So I'm no one," she said finally. "I'm a ghost wearing a dead girl's face." "You're Claire Donovan," Jack said fiercely. "You're real, you're here. And you're stronger than any of us deserved." Claire stood abruptly, her movements jerky with shock. "I need to be alone, Claire." "Wait, no." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "You've spent our entire marriage mourning a dead woman while I lived in the same house. I won't give you the satisfaction of watching me break." She moved toward the door with the careful precision of someone navigating by memory, her white cane tapping against the glass walls like a heartbeat. At the doorway, she stopped. "Thank you for finally telling me the truth," she said, without turning around, even if it came 20 years too late. Jack watched her go, the necklace heavy in his hands. Outside the conservatory windows, the sun was rising over Long Island, but all Jack could see were the shadows gathering like storm. Clouds around what remained of his carefully constructed life. In her office in Manhattan, Vanessa Harper made 2 phone calls. The first was to Greg Foster, her voice brisk and professional as she gave him instructions that would set certain wheels in motion. The second was to a number she'd memorized but never called, her voice silk over steel as she spoke words that would change everything. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is Vanessa Harper. I think it's time we had a conversation about your grandson's future." Dorothy Sullivan sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen holding court, her silver hair swept back in perfect waves, her pale eyes sharp as winter ice. At 73, she commanded the Sullivan legacy with the ruthless precision of someone who'd spent decades bending the world to her will. Across from her, Vanessa Harper perched on the edge of an antique chair, her posture respectful but her eyes calculating. "You've done well, my dear," Dorothy said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of old New York money. "Though I must admit, I didn't expect you to develop actual feelings for my grandson." Vanessa's smile was practiced perfection. "Business and pleasure don't have to be mutually exclusive, Mrs. Sullivan." "Indeed not." "Oh." Dorothy opened a leather portfolio, revealing photographs and documents that made Vanessa's breath catch. 20 years I've invested in this project. 20 years of shaping that girl into what Jack needed to see, and now he knows the truth. He won't abandon her, Vanessa said carefully. His guilt runs too deep. Guilt can be redirected. Dorothy's smile was razor sharp. Tell me, what do you know about Claire's medical history? Vanessa frowned. Beyond the blindness you orchestrated, not much. The chemicals that destroyed her sight also did something else. They left her with a rare blood disorder, one that requires very specific medication to manage. Dorothy slid a medical file across the desk. Medication that I've been providing through Margaret Hayes for 17 years. The implications hit Vanessa like ice water. You're going to stop her treatment? I'm going to create a crisis.
Dorothy's
Voice was matter of fact, as if discussing the weather. Claire will collapse within days. She'll need immediate hospitalization, emergency treatment, and Jack, consumed with guilt, will move heaven and earth to save her. And then, you become indispensable. The brilliant woman who finds the experimental treatment that can cure her. The angel who offers to pay for procedures that insurance won't cover. Dorothy leaned back in her chair. Jack will be so grateful, so focused on Claire's recovery, that he won't notice how naturally he turns to you for support. Vanessa studied the older woman's face, seeing decades of manipulation refined to an art form. What makes you think he'll choose me over her? 'Cause choosing you will feel like freedom, while choosing her will feel like penance. Dorothy's eyes glittered with cold intelligence. Men always choose what feels like their own decision, even when they're being led. The plan was elegant in its cruelty, and Vanessa found herself both impressed and slightly sickened. And if it doesn't work, then Claire Donovan dies, and Jack inherits her considerable medical bills along with his grief. Dorothy's voice didn't change inflection. Either way, she's no longer a complication. Vanessa left the meeting with her head spinning. She'd thought herself ruthless. But Dorothy Sullivan operated on a level that made corporate espionage look like playground games. As her taxi wound through Manhattan traffic, she found herself thinking about Claire's gentle hands on the orchid leaves. The way she'd accepted Jack's cruelty with grace, she pushed the thoughts away. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford, but 3 blocks from Sullivan Enterprises, she told the driver to turn around. Meanwhile, Jack sat in his study with a crystal tumbler of whiskey that had gone untouched for an hour. The necklace lay on his desk like an accusation, the sun and moon pendants catching the lamplight. Across from him, Greg Foster shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The divorce papers are drawn up, Greg said quietly, along with a settlement offer that should set her up comfortably for life. Generous of me to divorce my wife and pay her for the privilege, Jack said, his voice bitter. Sir, if I may. Greg leaned forward, his usual deference replaced by something like urgency.
is
Something else you should know about Mrs. Sullivan. About Claire. Jack's head snapped up. What? Greg pulled a folder from his briefcase, his hands shaking slightly. I've been managing certain accounts for your grandmother for years, payments I thought were charitable donations. But after what Ms. Harper discovered, I started digging deeper. The medical records Greg spread across the desk made Jack's blood turn to ice. Claire's treatment history, medication schedules, doctors' reports that painted a picture of careful, deliberate poisoning disguised as care. The chemicals that blinded her were just the beginning, Greg said, his voice hollow. Your grandmother has been slowly destroying her body for 17 years. The medication she takes isn't treating a blood disorder, Jack. It's causing one. What are you saying? I'm saying if Claire stops taking that medication, she'll recover. Her blood will heal, her immune system will strengthen. But if she keeps taking it, Greg met Jack's eyes. She has maybe 6 months to live. The whiskey glass shattered against the wall as Jack surged to his feet. Where is she? I don't know. She left the house this morning with a small bag. The staff said she took a taxi. Jack was already reaching for his phone when it rang. Name flashed on the screen, and he answered with desperate hope. Jack, thank God. Vanessa's voice was tight with fear. I'm at Presbyterian Hospital. Claire collapsed on 5th Avenue an hour ago. The drive to Manhattan blurred past in a haze of sirens and flashing lights. Jack found Vanessa in the emergency waiting room. Her perfect composure cracked like broken porcelain. "How bad?" he asked without preamble. "Bad." Her blood pressure crashed. Her organs started shutting down. "They're running tests," but Vanessa grabbed his arm. Dr. Elizabeth Chen was a small woman with tired eyes who spoke in the clipped tones of someone who'd delivered. "Too much bad news?" She found Jack pacing the surgical waiting room like a caged wolf. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm treating your wife."
How is you?
"She, stable for now, but I need to ask you about her medical history. The medication she's been taking appears to be causing systematic organ damage." Jack's jaw clenched. "What kind of medication?" Dr. Chen consulted her tablet. "Compound that's not FDA approved. Very experimental, very dangerous." "Who prescribed?" "This I don't know. The lie tasted like ash." "Can you treat her?" "We can try to counteract the damage, but she needs to stop taking the medication immediately. The problem is, her body has become dependent on it. Withdrawal could kill her faster than the poison." Jack closed his eyes, feeling the walls of Dorothy's trap closing around him. Even in trying to save Claire, he could lose her. "Or something else," Dr. Chen continued. "The pattern of damage suggests this has been going on for years. Decades even. Someone has been systematically poisoning your wife since childhood." The words hit Jack like physical blows. Not just Dorothy's manipulation, not just stolen memories, and manufactured dreams. Deliberate, calculated murder spread out over 20 years. "Can I see her?" Claire lay in the ICU like a broken bird, tubes and wires monitoring the slow failure of systems that should have kept her strong. Her auburn hair spread across the white pillow, her face pale as paper. She looked exactly like what she was. Victim of Dorothy Sullivan's monstrous ambition. Jack took her hand. Feeling how cold her fingers were, how fragile her pulse felt against his thumb. "I'm sorry," he whispered. For all of it. For not seeing, for not protecting you, for not being what you needed." Claire's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. "Jack, I'm here." "The dreams are gone," she said, her voice barely audible. "All those memories of being someone else, they just stopped." "Maybe that's good." "Is it?" Claire turned her head toward his voice, "Because now I don't know who I am at all." Jack squeezed her hand. "You're Claire Donovan.
Ow.
You're 22 years old. You're stronger than anyone has a right to be, and you deserve better than what any of us have given you. Wanna be even?" "You?" The question cut through him like a blade. "Especially me." Claire was quiet for a long moment, her breathing shallow but steady. "Jack, yeah? When I die, will you remember me? Not as your Sonny? Not as Dorothy's project? Just as me." "You're not going to die," Jack said fiercely. "I won't let you." Claire's smile was sad and knowing. "Some things aren't up to you." A commotion in the hallway made Jack look up. Through the ICU window, he saw Dorothy Sullivan approaching with her usual imperious stride, flanked by hospital administrators who looked simultaneously deferential and nervous. "I have to go," Jack told Claire. "Don't let her in here," Claire said, her voice suddenly urgent. "Please? I can't face her right now." Jack kissed her forehead gently. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." He met Dorothy in the hallway, his grandmother's. Pale eyes assessing the situation with cold calculation. "How is she?" Dorothy asked, her voice carrying just the right amount of concern for the watching administrators. "Dying," Jack said flatly, "because of you." Dorothy's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you mean. I know about the medication. I know about Margaret Hayes. I know about all of it." Jack's voice was low, dangerous. "You've been murdering her for 20 years. I've been keeping her alive," Dorothy corrected smoothly. "That medication has managed a rare blood disorder that would have killed her as a child, caused by the chemicals you had injected into her eyes. Prove it." Dorothy's smile was glacial. "You'll find that every doctor involved is either dead or has signed very comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. Every record has been carefully maintained to show legitimate medical treatment for a tragic genetic condition." Jack stared at his grandmother, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not a family matriarch protecting their legacy, but a monster who'd spent decades perfecting her craft. "Why?" he asked. Because the Sullivan family was dying, Dorothy said simply. 3 generations of failed marriages, weak heirs, scattered wealth. You were our last hope, but you were too busy chasing ghosts to secure our future. So you created a ghost for me to find. I created a solution. A wife who would bind you to the family, produce heirs to carry on our name, never challenge your authority, because she'd been trained from childhood to accept whatever she was given. Claire has been the perfect wife, hasn't she? Grateful, obedient, undemanding. She's a human being, not a broodmare. She's a tool that has served its purpose. Dorothy glanced toward Claire's room. And now, sadly, that tool is breaking down. Jack felt something snap inside his chest. Get out. I beg your pardon. Get out of this hospital. Stay away from Claire. Stay away from me. Jack's voice carried the weight of Sullivan money and power. If you come near either of us again, I'll destroy you. Dorothy's laugh was genuinely amused. With what? No proof of anything illegal? Every action I took was documented as medical necessity or charitable intervention. And even if you could prove otherwise, do you really want the world to know that your entire marriage is based on decades of child abuse? Do you want Claire too? Live with that scandal? The trap was perfect, elegant in its cruelty. Dorothy had constructed a web so complex that struggling only made it tighter. Besides, Dorothy continued, Claire needs that medication to survive withdrawal. I'm the only one who knows the proper dosage and treatment schedule. You could let the doctors experiment, of course. But how many mistakes can her failing body survive? Jack looked through the window at Claire, so small and fragile in the hospital bed, and back at his grandmother's triumphant smile. What do you want? For you to come home, resume your duties as head of Sullivan Enterprises. Provide Claire with the best medical care money can buy, and when she's stable enough, help her transition to a comfortable life somewhere far from New York. Dorothy's voice was reasonable, almost kind. Marry someone suitable, someone who can give the family what it needs. Someone like Vanessa Harper. Dorothy's smile widened. Miss Harper has proven herself quite resourceful, and unlike Claire, she chose this life freely. Jack felt the walls closing in around him. Dorothy had engineered every aspect of this crisis, anticipated every possible response. Claire would die without the medication that was killing her. She'd die with it too, just more slowly. Either way, Dorothy won. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course. But don't take too long. Claire's condition is quite fragile. Dorothy swept away like a departing storm, leaving Jack alone in the hallway with the weight of impossible choices. Through the window, he watched Claire sleep, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd known her. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Meet me in the chapel. There's something you need to know. Jack found her in the small interfaith chapel on the hospital's 3rd floor, her head bowed as if in prayer. She looked up when he entered, her eyes red with tears that might have been genuine. I'm sorry, she said without preamble, for all of it. For taking the necklace, for manipulating the situation, for helping Dorothy trap you. Jack sank into the pew beside her. Why? Because I loved you. Because I thought if I could just make you see me, really see me, you'd choose me over a ghost. Vanessa's voice broke. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did. Yes. And now, Claire's dying because of choices I helped make. Vanessa turned to face him. Jack, there's something else. Something Dorothy doesn't know. She pulled a small vial from her purse. The liquid inside clear as water. I stole this from the pharmacy that's been supplying Claire's medication. The pure compound, undiluted by the stabilizing agents. What does that mean? It means I can reverse engineer the withdrawal protocol and create a treatment schedule that will wean her off the poison without killing her. Vanessa's eyes were bright with desperate hope. I can save her, Jack, but I need your help. Jack stared at the vial in her hands, seeing another trap within the larger trap. What's the catch? There isn't one. I just want Claire to live. I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me. Vanessa placed the vial in his palm. This is my choice, Jack. My way of trying to make amends. Jack closed his fingers around the small bottle, feeling the weight of possible redemption. "Why should I trust you? 'Cause I'm the only one who has nothing left to lose," Vanessa said simply. "Dorothy can destroy my career, but she can't take away the fact that I loved you enough to let you go." In the distance, alarms began sounding from the ICU. Jack and Vanessa ran toward Claire's room, where doctors and nurses swarmed around machines that screamed warnings into the sterile air. Dr. Chen met them at the door. Her face grim. "She's crashing. Whatever decision you're going to make about her treatment, you need to make it now." Jack stood at the crossroads between salvation and damnation, Vanessa's vial burning in his palm like liquid fire. Through the ICU window, he watched machines fight to keep Claire alive, while her body battled the poison that had been her constant companion for 17 years. Dr. Chen waited beside him, her eyes reflecting the fluorescent lights like questions he couldn't answer. "Mr. Sullivan, I need your decision now," she said quietly. "We can continue the current treatment protocol and hope for the best, or we can try something experimental." Jack looked at Vanessa, seeing something in her green eyes he'd never noticed before. Not calculation or ambition, but genuine remorse wrapped around a core of desperate love. She was offering him everything: Claire's life, his freedom, her own. "Destruction is an experimental treatment," he said, handing Dr. Chen the vial. "This contains the compound she's been taking. Use it to create a withdrawal protocol." Dr. Chen studied the clear liquid with professional skepticism. Where did this come from? Does it matter if it saves her? "Everything matters when we're dealing with unlicensed pharmaceuticals, Mr. Sullivan. I need to know what we're working with." Vanessa stepped forward, her voice steady, despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "I obtained it from the pharmacy that's been supplying Claire's medication for the past 20 years. It's the pure compound, before dilution and stabilization. And you are someone who helped create this situation." Vanessa's honesty was stark, unforgiving. Someone who's trying to fix it. Dr. Chen looked between them, seeing layers of guilt, in desperation that went far beyond normal family crisis. "I'll need complete medical records going back to childhood. Everything. And I'll need you both to understand that this is uncharted territory. We could save her, or we could kill her. Faster than the poison would?" "She's dying anyway," Jack said quietly. "At least this way, she has a chance." The next 72 hours blurred together like a fever dream. Claire's body fought the withdrawal with the desperation of an addict, her temperature spiking and crashing. While machines monitored systems pushed beyond their limits, Jack never left her side, holding her hand through convulsions that shook the bed rails. Whispering apologies into the darkness of her unconscious world, Vanessa became a ghost haunting the corridors. Bringing coffee he didn't drink and updates he barely heard. She'd taken leave from Sullivan Enterprises, claiming a family emergency that everyone knew was a lie. Dorothy's wrath would be biblical when she discovered Vanessa's betrayal. But the woman who'd once schemed for power now seemed beyond caring about consequences. On the second night, Claire's heart stopped. Jack watched the monitors flatline with a strange, hollow calm as medical staff swarmed around the bed. Dr. Chen barked orders while nurses injected medications and charged defibrillators, but he found himself thinking about orchids blooming in windows Claire couldn't see, about piano melodies that lived in her bones like forgotten prayers. "Come on," he whispered to her still face. "Don't let her win." The monitor blipped once, twice, then resumed its steady rhythm as Claire's chest rose and fell with renewed determination. "She's back," Dr. Chen announced, her voice thick with exhaustion. In relief, vitals are stabilizing. Jack collapsed into the chair beside Claire's bed, his legs finally giving out after 60 hours of standing vigil. Across the room, Vanessa leaned against the wall with her eyes closed, looking like someone who'd aged a decade in 3 days. "You should go home," Jack told her. "Get some rest." "So should you. I'm not leaving her again." Vanessa opened her eyes, studying his face with an expression he couldn't read. "You love her?" It wasn't a question, but Jack answered anyway. "Yeah, I do, even knowing she's not Sunny." Jack looked at Claire's peaceful face, seeing past the manufactured dreams. and implanted memories to the woman who'd survived 2 decades of calculated cruelty with her soul intact. Especially knowing she's not Sunny, he said. Claire's real. Her strength, her kindness, her grace under pressure that would have broken anyone else, that's all hers. Vanessa's smile was heartbreaking in its sadness. I thought if I could make you see the truth about her, you'd choose me instead. You did make me see the truth, just not the truth you expected. No. Vanessa pushed herself away from the wall, straightening her wrinkled clothes with hands that still shook slightly. I suppose not, Vanessa. Jack's voice stopped her at the door. What you did, getting that compound, helping with the treatment. Why? Because I realized something during those phone calls with Dorothy. Vanessa's voice was quiet, reflective. It had become everything I hated about your grandmother. Someone who saw people as tools to be used rather than lives to be respected. And now I'm going to disappear before Dorothy can destroy what's left of my career. Vanessa's laugh was bitter. There are other cities, other companies, other chances to be better than I was here. She left without another word, her footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor like a retreat from battle. Jack never saw her again. Though he heard rumors months later about a brilliant real estate executive in Seattle who'd started a foundation for abused children, Claire woke on the 4th day to sunlight streaming through windows. She couldn't see, but somehow felt warming her face. Her first conscious thought was that the constant ache in her bones was gone, replaced by something she'd never experienced before, the absence of pain. Jack. Her voice was barely a whisper. He was there instantly, his hand finding hers with the certainty of practice. I'm here. How long? 4 days. You've been fighting withdrawal from the medication Dorothy was giving you. Claire absorbed this information with the careful attention of someone learning the shape of a new world. And now you heal. Dr. Chen says the damage is reversible, at least mostly. Your blood work is already improving. Claire turned her head toward his voice, her unseeing eyes, somehow finding his face. What about Dorothy? She's been arrested. Federal charges for kidnapping, child endangerment, and about a dozen other crimes. Jack's voice carried grim satisfaction. The FBI was very interested in Greg's financial records once they understood what had been happening. And Margaret had overdosed 3 days ago, right after the FBI showed up at her door in Oregon. Jack squeezed her hand gently. You're free, Claire? Completely free? The concept felt too large to grasp all at once. Freedom. No more Dorothy orchestrating her life from the shadows. Or no more medication slowly poisoning her system. No more pretending to be someone else's ghost. What happens now? She asked Jack. Was quiet for a long time, and Claire could almost hear him thinking. That depends, he said finally. It's on what you want. I want to know who I really am. It's not Dorothy's creation, not Sunny's shadow, just me. I'd like to help with that if you'll let me. Claire considered this, weighing his words against everything that had happened between them. Why, because I love you, Jack said simply. Not as Sunny, not as Dorothy's project. As Claire Donovan, the woman who tends gardens she can't see and plays music that makes my chest ache. The woman who survived 20 years of hell and still has enough grace to forgive the people who put her there. Even you, especially me. Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the hospital blanket. I don't remember loving you as a child, so those memories are gone, maybe forever. Good, Jack said, surprising her. They were never yours to begin with. But I think, Claire continued slowly, I might like to try loving you as an adult, as myself. Jack brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm that felt like a promise. I'd like that too. 6 months later, Claire stood in the conservatory of a house they'd bought together in Connecticut, her hands moving confidently over the leaves of plants she'd chosen and tended herself. The glass walls caught the afternoon sun, warming the air to the perfect temperature for the orchids that had become her specialty. The white ones are blooming, Jack said from the doorway. Claire smiled without turning around. I can smell them. Like vanilla and promises. Jack moved up behind her, his arms circling her waist as she leaned back against his chest. She was stronger now, the poison finally purged from her system, though her sight remained lost to Dorothy's cruelty. Some damages couldn't be undone, Only lived with any regrets? He asked, his chin resting on top of her head. Claire considered the question seriously. The press had been brutal during Dorothy's trial, painting their marriage as either a romantic fairy tale or an elaborate con job, depending on which narrative sold more papers. She'd testified against Dorothy with quiet dignity, telling the truth about Margaret's treatment and the medication's effects without flinching from the ugly details. Dorothy had died in federal prison 3 months into her sentence, her heart finally failing under the weight of her own poison. Jack had attended the funeral alone, standing in the rain beside a grave that few mourners visited. No regrets, Claire said finally. Dorothy was right about one thing. I was meant to save the Sullivan family. How do you figure? I saved you from becoming her. Claire turned in his arms, her hands finding his face with the sureness of love and practice. That's worth 20 years of hell. Jack kissed her then. Soft and gentle and full of the kind of love that shows itself freely. Around them, the orchids bloomed in silent witness to the victory of two people who'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion was simply refusing to become the monsters other people tried to make them. That evening, as they sat together, in their garden listening to the crickets sing, Claire fingered the new necklace Jack had given her. Not sun and moon pendants, carrying the weight of false promises, but a simple silver chain with a single pendant shaped like an orchid in bloom. Real, present, chosen.
Ow.
Tell me again, she said softly. Tell me who I am. Jack's voice was warm with certainty. You're Claire Donovan Sullivan. You're 23 years old. You're stronger than anyone has a right to be, and you're exactly who you were always meant to become. Claire smiled, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones, like sunlight. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Asterisk like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. The end.